Figured it was time to catch up with a guy, J Leman. You can see him on Big Ten Network. Of course, he's with us throughout the Illinois football season. And Jay, as we had spring ball wrap up and got the draft wrapped up, I figured, man, we need to talk with you about what we learned during the spring, talk a little NFL draft. So how are you, man? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. Always good to have a little chat. May 1st, it's hard to believe that in less than 4 months, Illinois football is going to be playing. But, there was some spring ball that was played. And I can tell you from a player's perspective, there's no greater day than when the spring game comes and you're done with spring ball, because it is a grind. You're hitting each other. And these are the 2 weeks that they get to have where they're actually just students and can enjoy the college life a little bit.
What is different about the end of spring ball or spring ball compared to like training camp? Like, how do you compare the grinds of it?
Well, see, training camp, you're working till you get to game week, because once you get to game week with any kind of football team, you start to taper, right? Because you're not going to just blast each other and be really physical that whole week. You're going to get into, okay, like Tuesday, we're going to have our hitting day on short yardage. Wednesday, we're going to work third down. Thursday is going to be an overview, and Friday is going to be a walkthrough. Where like training camp, the first 3 weeks is like boom, boom, boom. You're trying to win a position. Spring football is different because it's position battles. Sometimes you're trying a new position. A guy like Tyson Rooks, like moves from safety to receiver. Like you're learning brand new stuff. It's awkward. Sometimes you have a lot of unlike when I played, you have a lot of early enrollees, and these guys are just like straight deer in the headlights, right? Like they're learning where to line up. They're learning where to do them. But what's really difficult is you only get the payoffs of the scrimmages, and it's physical. And what I like about the end of spring ball is if you're Illinois, you have about a week to 10 days before finals start, and usually they'll give you a finals week off to get your tests and stuff like that off. And I don't think the coaches have much contact with you for 4 or 5, 6 weeks. Yeah. And so it's like you and maybe the strength coach a little bit, but you really get to experience the college life of not having to do stuff all the time. You might have an hour a day of working out and stuff. And so it's a nice change up for a college kid. And so it's exciting when spring ball's done.
All right. So spring game, you were on the call for Big Ten Network, did a great job, by the way. And there's only so much you can learn from this kind of setting.
Yeah.
I know they're not keeping score, but it is our really first look at seeing these guys move, seeing where they're lined up with the first string, second string, things like that, Jay. So what was the biggest thing you learned about this team in the spring game?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the guy that surprised me the most was Donovan Leary. I thought I call him Deep Ball Don, because he's from New Jersey. So you can call him a Don, a Don, or whatever, but you can also starts with the D of the alliteration. I thought Leary's arm was really, really impressive. He can make throws from all over the field. He can throw it from the opposite hash to the sideline on the deep out or the deep corner. He was accurate. He lacks a little bit of touch. Altmaier definitely has more touch on it. So I think, number one, he impressed me. Number two is I was really interested to see defensively what kind of changes are we going to make. Now, I was not expecting to get full answers to that question, right? But we've had a lot of staff changes. We've had a lot of player, personnel changes. You're losing probably our best two defense. We are losing our best two or three defensive linemen to the draft and the NFL. And a lot of people were banged up at the linebacker position, which I believe the linebackers are going to be one of the deepest positions we have. They've been more inexperienced and a little bit less depth there in prior years. And then we have Matthew Bailey and Xavier Scott, probably our best two defensive backs, out for it. So I didn't really see much from the defense, to be honest. It was very hard for me to okay, what am I seeing? But Donovan Leary, number one. Number two, J.C. Davis was as good as advertised. I thought he was on balance. I think he's going to be a phenomenal tackle. And I think he's going to really shore up that spot. I think Julian Pearl had a average to good year. I think J.C. Davis could be a possible all conference. Whether he's first team all Big Ten, that's very difficult with 18 teams, but I think he could be a second team all Big Ten guy. I mean, number one rated transfer out of the Power Five, right? As far as the offensive lineman, some people had him as. So I think that was good. And then number three, because I can't just give you one. I can't just give you two. Is I really am interested to see this be an offensive team, an offensive driven team rather than a defensive driven team. I really believe that we've got to average over 30 points if we want to be in that 6 to 8 win territory this season. When you look at our schedule and you look at college football as a whole, it's very difficult to win games consistently. I think we gave up 29 and we maybe averaged 25. I think we need to be above 30 points a game. And the question is when we get all our weapons, can we do that? So that's really the question I'm asking myself when I watch this football team.
Yeah, because we got so many questions about the defense that I want to dive into here, Jay. But offensively, I'm with you. I thought Donovan Leary struggled a little early in that game, and to see him bounce back with those deep balls, the accuracy that he was showing, because I thought a few of the first passes I thought could have been picked. His receivers didn't help him early on, but I came away thinking that looks like a competent backup that can give me a chance if he's got to go into a game. And I'm still high on Luke Altmaier. Like I know John Paddock, the way he ended the season, almost made it a negative on Luke Altmaier. I thought we saw great things from him his first year, some growing pains from him the first year. And I came out of the spring game thinking quarterback's a strength. Like how big of a strength do you think quarterback actually is?
Yeah, and that's a good point about Leary. I think he struggled early. I think, again, he doesn't throw that catchable of a ball now. He struggles with some touch throws. But I do think quarterback is a strength. I actually think the John Paddock thing actually motivated Luke. For him to go through that, basically get benched. Now, he was injured, but then got benched for the last 2 games at least. And then stick with Illinois and basically say, I'm here, I'm going to be a leader. And that speaks a lot about Luke. I still think he's our best quarterback that we have. I said in the game, the processing time has to pick up, right? I mean, that was the big knock on Luke, where, and I think everything's reactionary. You go and throw 4 picks against Penn State, you might hold on to the ball a little bit longer before you throw it, right? And then you hold on to the ball and you get sacked. And man, we're having an offensive line that's kind of shuffled around musical chairs and guys out of position or guys banged up or guys hurt. And all of a sudden, I'm holding on to the ball and I'm getting sacks, I'm getting negative plays, or I'm getting holdings, and now drives are just getting killed. And offense is about execution. And when you have those negative plays or penalties, that's a big issue. So I don't think it was all on Luke Altmaier, the mistakes and whatnot. But I think, number one, his processing time is better. He struggled a little bit with movement and on the run. We saw him make those throws last year, so I'm not necessarily worried about that. Again, remember, Luke Altmaier's ability to run the football is a critical point. Now, they're not going to run him in spring football with planned runs, but that's definitely going to be part of the arsenal when Barry Lenny moves forward. I think he definitely has an edge to Donovan on that part of his game, is the mobility. And so, but what I'm excited to see, though, is I really think that we have a batch. Pat Bryant is a commodity, and we know what Pat Bryant can bring. I'll say this, Pat Bryant, some games can look like an all Big Ten receiver. Yep. Other games, he can disappear. And I think Pat would tell you there was games and catches that, I think it was the Minnesota game. He had his hands on a football in the end zone 2 or 3 times, and they were contested catches. They were tough catches, okay? I'm not saying they're not tough, but you got to come down with 1, 2 of those if you're going to be a great all Big Ten receiver.
Absolutely.
And so you think about Pat Bryant, and you think about, hey, the growth we're having as far as depth, the receiver position. LZ had some drops. Hollins had some drops, but they're making each other better at that other receiver spot. And there's a big battle between Beatty, Wilcher, Sanders at that slot position to take over that Isaiah Williams position. And then I'm interested as well, the tight end position with Rusk being more of a flex tight end. And you've got Boyder. Is it Boyder or Boyer?
Boyer.
I played with a tight end called Boyder, and it just kills me every time. Okay, Boyer and Arkin, kind of that physical tip lineman thing. Now, I went through all the receivers, but it was in context of that offense, because the more they get chemistry with that, the better I think they're going to be.
If they get consistency out of the wide receivers, Jay, I think this passing attack could be a lot of fun, because I do think what I saw of the offensive line was encouraging. You mentioned JC Davis. I am very high on him. I think he's probably the best non-quarterback transfer Brett Bielema has gotten. Just a plug and play left tackle. There's so much value in that. And I just saw some speed and athleticism out of Melvin Priestley. Like those stretch runs like that with Aiden Lawfrey got me excited because we didn't see that with Illinois quite last year. So what did you see out of the offensive line? Because I know the staff is high on the depth that's kind of built there.
So one thing I'm always looking at for tackles, and I call it different than other people, but is their ability to kick slide out of their stance and pass coverage and be able to anchor in the face of a bull rush. Like, you go back last year, and I think Zai's a better guard, but, against the Kansas game, we really struggled anchoring against a bull rush, as far as getting that kick slide back and being a good enough athlete and balanced to take on a 270-pound edge rusher who's coming at you full speed that can either do a move or can bull rush you. Do you have the balance? I'm always looking for balance and power at the tackle position, which you have to be athletic. I think JC Davis has that. Does he overwhelm you with his size? No. But and that's probably why a lot of Power Fives overlooked him. But he's very balanced, and he has enough power and enough ability. You can just great technique. Priestley and is it Henderson? No. Yeah. Our two East St. Louis guys battle. Those are both athletic guys. They're a little bit more raw on the technique as opposed to JC Davis, but you can see the feet and the speed is there for them to actually play that position at a high level. So I am excited about that on the offensive line, because I think if you can shore up those tackle spots, you can take away usually Johnny Newton is a anomaly being the best rusher as an interior lineman. You can usually take away a team's best rusher, right? And so that's what I'm excited about. I believe Kreutz will be an NFL player when it's all said and done.
He looked good.
He's looking really good. We're still filling in and find out who can play guard. I think Geske, we know he's serviceable. I think it's Wigginton was the other one, and whatnot. So I think right now we're strongest at tackle and center. I think the guards, that's probably where you want to be strong too. If I had to pick, I want to be strong all over, but you really want to be strong there. I'm excited about the tackles. One thing they ask the tackles to do, which you need to be an athlete, is to really climb to the second level. So you have to get out and pull, kind of on the Aiden Lawfrey pitch to the edge, and you got to climb up to the second level and be athletic enough not to blow up a lineman, but a linebacker, but to get in the way and make him run over the top or underneath. And I think we can do that.
I want to ask you just in Barry Loney year 3 here in a second, Jay, but Aiden Lawfrey really stood out. And I thought Thad Ward had a quote during the spring that kind of stood out to me. He said, some guys run 10-8, but they don't, that doesn't show on the field.
Sure.
And it felt like Aiden was that way his first couple of years as he dealt with some of these nagging injuries.
Sure.
That's as fast and as decisive as I've seen him. So he's kind of what they need at that position next to all these big backs. And what did you see from Aiden?
Yeah, so I think, one, he stands out because you basically have, I'm not going to say they're clones, but they're similar body types with Anderson, Fagan, and McCray, right? I mean, they're very similar. But what the best run of Aiden all day was the one that he went straight up the gut, right? And ran for about 25 yards and showed some real power as well. I mean, breaking a few tackles. But I love to see him run up the gut with confidence and kind of 0 to 100 miles an hour when he's hitting the line. That's the difference that you have. And you can also see he's much more of a shotgun back than any of the other backs. I've said this before. Shotgun backs have a Chase Brown, great shotgun back, right? Can go from 0 to 100 very fast. The acceleration's there. Josh McCray, I'd love to see more of him in the pistol or in an eye or in what they call the dot, a single back 7 yards back from the center, because you kind of get those guys going. Fagan is a little bit better than McCray at getting going, and he's kind of a hybrid in between McCray and Lawfrey. So those are the different things. I haven't seen much of Anderson, but Aiden Lawfrey, I would agree with you. I think they're going to use him too. He showed me he can catch the football.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to use him. He's a great screen back. He's a great swing pass guy. He's a great option route in the flat, manned up on a linebacker. That's a mismatch, right? You get a guy like me on A and Lawfrey, and you're basically saying, okay, just don't give up the inside. You're always going to give up that little outright for 3 or 4 yards. And if you can pitch and catch, which Altmaier's shown he can do, that's a first down that can move the chain. So there's different ways you can put him in. I do think when Fagan's healthy, we'll see a lot of what I think is what we call 20 personnel. 20 personnel would be 2 backs and no tight ends, because I believe it's going to get the best players on the field. Depending how Cole Rusk is and how he develops, we could be in 21 personnel. But I think you could get, Elzy, Bryant, Wilcher on the field with Lawfrey, with Fagan in the backfield, motion Lawfrey out. Now you've got a backer on Lawfrey, and now your inside receivers are Wilcher and Lawfrey, and you've got to pick. One of those guys has to be picked up by a linebacker. That's probably going to be his first read. So you can kind of work the personnels in there, and I'm getting really technical with you guys, but that's what I see Lawfrey could be if he can catch the ball as well, because that's a huge bonus.
I asked this of Barry earlier in the spring. How is year 3 of his offense? What is the identity? How is it different than what we've seen the last couple of years with Barry?
You asked him that, or you're asking me that?
Yeah, I asked him that. How do you think it's going to be different? Like, what do you think the identity is going to be?
Well, my thing is this, and I don't think he showed a lot of it, but I think with Pat Bryant, Malik Elzy, and Ashton Hollins, we've got some really big bodies. Those are big body dudes. And in order to run the RPO like we saw him do at UTSA, you got to have a big body receiver. Like, I love Isaiah Williams, great guy. Tough to run an RPO to Isaiah, because as a defender, I can reach around Isaiah with one arm. You trying to reach around to Malik Elzy with one arm is difficult, right? I mean, it's hard. It's a big body. So one, I think we're going to see more of the RPO. I think they want to be an RPO team. And what the RPO does more than anything is it forces a defense, if you're good at it, to go to man-to-man. Because an RPO, if I do man-to-man, it doesn't matter what you're doing, because I'm just guarding my man defensively. But when I'm in zone, that's what makes it hard on the linebackers. If you can run the football with Fagan, right? I fake it. I'm faking the zone, read the run action, and that's going to bite the linebackers up. And if we can bang that 3 or 4 times in the first half, the defensive coordinator is going to call down and say, we got to go man. Once you get them in man, then we bring out all the option routes and the crossing routes and matchups that you like to see. And so I think it gives you a lot. So one, I think you'll see RPO. Okay. Number 2 is I think that we're going to have more complex passing routes and strategies. I think the Altmaier's processing time was slower. I think we're going to see 1, 2, 3 options, right? I think he's going to get to the 3rd option. We didn't see that much last year. We saw Paddock get on, get off, and do that faster. So I didn't see that. 2, what I also saw is I saw Lunny's taking his shots, but what I think a lot of our guys are built for, and we saw this, is that 15-yard dig, is that 17-yard comeback. I think we'll see a lot of those routes, because that's kind of what our personnel's built at right now. Last year, it was, okay, throw it up to Casey Washington, Pat Bryant, we can kind of throw it up to some, and underneath option routes to Isaiah Williams, and we'll hit Tip Ryman for 2 passes on a boot flat pass, all that. That's what it was. Yeah. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of that mid-range with the RPO and in the 10 to 20-yard range. I think Barry Lunny, former quarterback, I do think he wants balance. I think he's probably more pro pass than Brett is, and Brett's probably a little bit more run the ball, which I think it's a good balance. But I think Barry wants to air it out.
All right, Jay. You mentioned the defense. Like, I really couldn't take much away from that game. One, there was so much personnel that was not on the field with all the injuries at linebacker and in the secondary. Yeah. And 2, like, I am very interested in, we've talked about this before, like, the Ryan Walters Illinois defense got torn up a little bit last year, both Purdue and at Illinois. Sure. So what are their schematic changes here? But there is no doubt this is a big year for Aaron Henry. There's a lot of pressure on him with a revamped staff here, still going to add one more defensive back. So what do you think that adjustment is for this defense, given how much talent you've lost to the NFL the last 2 years.
Yeah, so they were able to play a very aggressive style in 2022 because of some of the athletes. I mean, we had for Illinois, I think this term gets thrown out, but for Illinois, it was definitely a generational corner. We've never had a corner like Devin Witherspoon in this program. He's a top 5 pick. And, you look at the metrics, by all metrics, that 2022 year, he was erasing receivers from the score box. I mean, it was like he wouldn't play Trey Palmer, who's in the NFL now. It's like he didn't even play the game when they were against Nebraska, right? I mean, it was like he was erasing players off the field. You also had a guy in Quan Martin who did a lot of different things at the star position, could do different things with playing nickel and safety and even corner. And of course, Sidney was unique as well. A bunch of very unique guys. And so you could play ultra aggressive. I think they tried early on to do that. I think the Kansas game where they had 19 throws for 20 yards or more or something like that, which is an insane stat, kind of blew the door off of okay, we can't play as aggressive. And Kansas has a good offense and very good scheme. A good coach is there. But we can't play that aggressive. So here's my number one concern is this. I'm really concerned about stopping the run first and foremost. I think that's going to be a big challenge. Do I think Dylan Rosiak and Gabe Akis and Seth Coleman are good players? Yeah, I do. Do I think that James Kreutz is going to be a good player? Yeah, I do. Do I think that Alex Bray is a guy that is a recruiting hit? Yes, I think they hit on him and it's great, but I think he's really young. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to be successful down in playing and play out in the Big Ten and being young. Do I think Briggs and Sledge are space eaters up there? Yeah, I do. I don't think we're going to be as good in the D-line as we were. It's just not going to be – you don't replace a Johnny Newton right away. And I think
7 of their 10 scholarship defensive linemen are underclassmen. That scares me.
That scares me. And so, one, if you can't stop the run, you're not going to go very far. Okay, and that really plays against the ball control strategy of what Brett wants to do. And it's part of the reason I think we're going to throw the football more. We have to score more points, and we have to score them faster. But so I think I'm scared about their ability to stop the run. Do I think Dylan Rosiak is a guy that's developed into a good linebacker? I do. But again, I think the front 7. It's going to be different. I think it's going to be very difficult to stop the run with some of the players they're playing against. And I don't know what the changes they're going to make are or what, but I would assume that we would see more bend but don't break style defense this year, especially on the back end, even though I believe that Matthew Bailey and I believe Xavier Scott, and it sounds like Tyler Strain's playing better. It sounds like Caleb Patterson's making headway. It sounds like all these people are coming along. I just don't think we can be nearly as aggressive with the amount of snaps in man coverage. And they kind of got away from that later in the year that we've had the past 2 years, especially in 2022. They've got to have a more bend but don't break scheme. So I'm interested, though. We have new coaches in Archie McDaniel and Clint Sinham, and there's going to be another DB coach. Really, it's just Terrence Jameson and Aaron Henry that are still there. So they could bring a whole bunch of new ideas that I don't know, and I don't think they've showed. But that's kind of what my guess is.
Yeah. The outside linebackers have to be great, right? Seth Coleman needs to be an NFL player. Gabe Akis needs to take that star turn. I think and I wonder if they go to more 4-man fronts at times, Jay, with an overhang linebacker. So, but I just don't, those guys, they have to be all Big Ten caliber players for this defense.
I think you need 15 sacks out of them for the season.
Yeah,
to be where we're at, right? I mean, they've got to be in that 7-8 to sack range. Maybe one gets 10, maybe one gets 5. But in the words of Ron Zook, your A+ players have to play A+, and if they don't, you're not going to be as good. So I mean, if you think you're this good, you have to. If you think you're all Big Ten, you have to play at that all Big Ten level. They're going to have to find a way. If they're defensive, if the 2 outside linebackers can manufacture pressure on a 4-man rush, it changes the game. If they can't, we're going to be in trouble because then we're going to leave our DBs on an island a little bit. And I think the days of just rushing 5 every play, which is what they did for years, is just not going to be sustainable right now.
Is there anybody on that defense that you think can take a major leap here besides the guys we just talked about?
Well, I do think here's the thing. I really like the way Dylan Rosiak plays football. I think he plays it. I know he's undersized. I know he's not your ideal size and weight, but man, I think that he is a guy that we saw flashes of last year. I think he's a guy that really attacks downhill. I think so. I think he can make a leap, and I think he can be an all Big Ten player before he leaves. He may not look like it stature wise, but he plays in a big way. I also think I personally have not seen enough of Matthew Bailey myself to know if he's actually as good as advertised. He played sparingly in 2022. He got hurt after one quarter, unfortunately, in 2023. I do think Xavier Scott's going to be a Big Ten player. I think Xavier Scott can do a lot. I think he's a guy that can fill in a lot. But I'm looking for Seth Coleman to make the biggest jump. I know Seth had a decent year, and we've seen Seth. Seth's a lot like Pat Bryant. There are games where you're like, that dude's a dog. That dude's a real time, big time player. And then there are other games where you're like, is Seth Coleman playing? Yeah. And I think to be a great football player, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, it's so different than offense. They can call plays for you on offense, okay? Defense, within the framework of the defense called, you have to make plays. You can do your job and be out there and maybe not give up huge plays, but as a linebacker, a defensive end, a D-back, you've got to create disruption and you've got to create chaos. When you create disruption and chaos, great things happen for the defense because it messes up timing, it messes up execution, it leads to negative plays and turnovers. And ultimately, if you can do that, you can stop drives and get the ball back to your offense.
Yeah, consistency is key for him. Pat Bryant, guys like you're talking about that to take those big roles. And I mean, Seth was the best player in the field against Maryland. So if he can do that a few more times, then maybe they got something to cook with there. Jay, this program is so close to having one of the best 3-year stretches in Illinois history. Like they're so close. I've mentioned it, 15 points away from 3 straight bowl games and a Big Ten championship game appearance, but they missed some opportunities.
Sure.
Now in year 4, you have 8 seniors on scholarship right now before they add to the transfer portal. This always felt like it could be a retooling year, but it feels like there's more pressure because of some of those missed opportunities. So what is the importance of year 4 for Brett Bielema in this program?
Yeah, and there's no use crying over spilled milk, but I like to cry over because we could have got a bowl game easily. I feel like at Norton against in 2021 and in 2022 we could have had a Big Ten championship, at least a division championship. But I don't know. They played Michigan really close when they played them, so I mean that could be a change up. And then last year it was difficult. So it does seem like a critical year. Do I think that Brett is on some kind of hot seat? Absolutely not. I do think that the coaching changes he made put everybody on staff on notice that he's willing to make changes to get this thing right.
Yep.
And even I'll make an argument on positions that I thought played well. Like I thought the linebackers played pretty well last year with their youth and getting better with Kenena Odeluga, just kind of making the transition there and James Kreutz. And then he made a switch to linebacker coach with Andy Boot. Like I didn't see that one coming, right? So it's put the coach on notice. I do think this is a critical year. It feels like with the conference expansion and everything, that stakes have been raised a little bit. And you're like, okay, we've got to compete on a different level for recruiting and also for who we play year in and year out. I think the reality is if you took this job in 2020, like let's say Brett did, because he took it in 2020. This job looks drastically different than it did in 2020.
Yep.
We have NIL that gets approved in 2021. That is now, may have started with a spark that was a little campfire. It's now raging across the entire U.S. college football, college sports landscape. Number 2, you've got the transfer portal. Okay. And number 3, you have got, you're no longer in the West Division. I think a lot of these coaches, a draw of a job was, hey, I do play these 6 teams. I recruit against these 6 teams. I can play non-con and I can split my division and I can go to a bowl game. I think that was enticing. I think that's not the case anymore. So what is the plan moving forward? And I think Brett's committed to making it happen, but this does seem like a critical year where you feel like you have a lot of pieces kind of not quite ripe on defense. I think that's the word. I think we have some guys, we see it there. And listen, I've played on a defense in 2004 with, I think, 5 or 6 freshman starters that were good recruits and good players, but man, we were a horrible defense because we weren't ready to play against juniors and seniors at that time. And I'm not saying they're going to be horrible. I'm saying there's definitely going to be some growing pains on defense when you lose some of the guys they've lost. And so it does seem like a critical year. Do I think that we have the right guy, at the helm to figure it out in Brett? Yeah, I do. But I still think that the first 3 years, it felt like a ball control defensive team a little bit. Okay. Maybe not last year, I shouldn't say, but it kind of felt like that's what they wanted to be.
Sure.
This year, it feels like we got to score some points. Mm-hmm. You got your veteran players on that side of the football. You've got a quarterback returning. You got an offensive coordinator in year 3. You feel like this has to be the year that we're a 30-point or more offense. And if we can do that, I believe we can be in that 6 to 8 win range. I really do. Because anything can happen if you're within one possession in the fourth quarter. We've seen it happen. You got to be in with one possession in the fourth quarter, and anything can happen.
Jay, you mentioned one of those guys who came in and started right away. I wanted to give you a moment to talk about one of your former teammates who tragically passed away, Vontae Davis, part of that special 2007 team. Just any memories you'd like to share about Vontae, who's obviously a special talent. I always remember his voice and his laugh. That's what I remember when I think of Vontae, but you were teammates with him and went to battle with him.
Yeah, so a couple different things about Vontae. Number one, people don't realize that, that dreadful 2005 Penn State game, which was, I think it was on ESPN at night, like with a good, I think it was like maybe like Sean McDonough and Todd Blackledge. It was like a good group of it's like something like that. It was like good announcers and everything. It's like a game that like it would be, that Ohio State, Penn State would be playing. Like, it's like that kind of broadcast. We were on it and we got beat like 63 to 10 or something.
Michael Robinson, right?
Yeah, man, I've never got destroyed more by a quarterback in my life, but he was not like a quarterback. He played fullback in the NFL. But long story short is I think that Juice and Vontae committed on that night to play at Illinois. So who knows that, man, I could definitely play here. I'm sure they said that.
Kofi Coburn committed after Illinois lost to Florida Atlantic. It's funny how that happens.
Who did?
Kofi Coburn after.
Oh, did he? Okay. So there you go. So you can see these things that happen, right? So you're like, okay, it's interesting. But when Vontae got on campus, I remember the confidence the guy had. He's like, I need to play corner because I'm starting. Like I'm starting. I don't know if he told he was starting or if he just believed he was starting. And then I went and talked to our linebacker coach, Dan Dish, that time. He was like, oh yeah, that guy's going to be starting. I was like, he didn't play the snap. All he's doing is doing 7-on-7 workouts, right? But you can always tell that Vontae, as the young bucks say, was built different, right? I mean, literally built different. Vernon, his brother, was a specimen at tight end. Vontae was smaller, but he was put together. And I don't know if there's anybody. Vontae had great top end speed, but within a 10 by 10 box, if you would watch the guy move, he was incredible, right? I mean, he could let his agility to flip his hips and also be physical was really next level, and really allowed us that year to play a defense that he was a man-to-man on one side and everybody else kind of protected me. I could just kind of, do the old Ray Lewis defense and kind of cover the middle of the field and play run. That's what I did. But Vontae did that. And then, of course, I'll never forget some of the, made some incredible picks. I think he had a pick against Penn State. I think he had in the big game we had there. He actually knocked himself out, I believe, of the game against Ohio State by kidding that guy really hard early in the game. He's a guy that ran down Joe McKnight in the Rose Bowl, and I remember people asked me, "How fast is Vontae?" Right? So Vontae was a character. I can't say that Vontae always got the call or that we saw eye to eye on what defense we were running. Let's just put it that way. We may have had me and him may have had a few disagreements on the sideline about how to play certain defenses. But you always knew, we were better with him than without him, right? Yeah. And I had a chance to play against him in the NFL. Me and him had a preseason game. It was Carolina down in Miami in August. That's when I learned what real heat was. I thought Camp Rantoul was hot, and he was a first-round draft pick down there. And so it was fun to play against him a little bit. And went on actually, for all the stuff that people have said about, the hard knock stuff and the grandma stuff and, retiring at halftime. He had a good career, played 8 or 9 years as a corner, was a Pro Bowler for the Colts, and always had a big smile. Loved his family, him and Regis, Ben, obviously very close, out of Dunbar High School. Mike Loxley, very, very close. And he'll always be remembered as one of those guys. It was April 1st when I found out that he had passed. I actually thought, like, is this some kind of cruel April Fool's joke? And it's really sad to see him go. Of that team, we've lost 3 members. We've lost Jerry Brown to a tragic car accident, and we've lost Daniel Dufresne, who was a great backup running back on that team, backed up Richard, and now we've lost Vontae. So 3 critical pieces. It does make you think, that just in 17 years, how much stuff changes, and Vontae will be missed, and a great friend. And shows you that just because you have some disagreements on the field every once in a while, you can't be brothers off the field. And I kind of as a brother. So
well said, beautifully said there, Jay. I do want to ask you. Let's just end this on a higher note. For Illini, I get drafted. A couple other guys signed. What'd you think? Johnny Newton, somebody to the second round, surprised me, but Isaiah Adams, 3rd round. I'm so happy for him that, sacrificing for the team, didn't sacrifice his draft position. Tip Ryman going 3rd round. None of us would have predicted that, though. You were on the NFL train for him from a long time ago. And Casey Washington, man, like what a last couple weeks it was for him in an Illini uniform, and then a fantastic pro day. So what'd you make of all that?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, a couple surprising things. I thought Johnny Newton would go in the 1st round. I know that here's the thing, as a guy who, I had a foot injury, after the Rose Bowl. I hurt my foot during the Rose Bowl, actually, and wasn't able to run. And I was on edge as far as I was a 6th or 7th round guy at best, but I knew once I didn't run, it was pretty much, you're going to be an undrafted guy. So it does hurt you if you're not able to run at the combine or you had a surgery. So I think that hurt Johnny. It certainly, the only knock that people would have on Johnny is that he was, that he didn't run and he's short. Everything else, I mean, there's nothing else. And that's the thing, if you're in Illinois, you got to get a guy like Johnny where it's like, there's one thing missing that somebody's going to pass on. He's too short. Okay, we'll take him. Okay, now he's a baller, right? So it's like, it's probably the reason that John Morant ended up at Murray State, right? And so it happens. So so I was surprised by that. I had no question that Johnny will be a success, though. Good to see Isaiah Adams, who did switch all kind of different positions, but obviously impressed enough. So I'm happy for him. I love the article, and if people listening haven't read your article on Tip Ryman, I thought that was just a really, really cool story. And about his confidence, and it sounded like he always had, his story and wanting to be seen and kind of out there to prove people wrong with the intensity and a plan and sticking to the plan and diligent. Love that he drinks raw milk. I'm a raw eggs guy, so I had lots of love. He's a man of faith. I'm a man of faith. So there's some similarities I could see. I think he was just a lot faster than me, and I think if I ran the 4.64 or whatever he ran, I may have played a little bit longer, but when you're in 4.75, 4.8ville, it's just difficult. But it was really cool to hear his story. It's about Tip, and Tip's a guy that we really saw improve year in, year out, and just got to a size where he was literally like another offensive tackle, at least at the college game, and blocked like it. And we saw him grow from certainly 2022. We had some critical drops to 2023 where he caught the ball better and was able to beat out Luke Ford, like you said in your article, a top 100 prospect outright. And so I love Tip's story. I was excited to see him go. I didn't think he was going in the 3rd round. And then Casey Washington, I never thought he'd be drafted. Okay. I didn't think he'd be drafted. I didn't think he had enough when I watched him play, I didn't think he was twitchy enough, to be honest, to play receiver.
I never saw that Northwestern game coming. Jay, I know that's not a team full of, great, NFL athletes in that secondary, but he's running away from people. I never thought that would happen. I thought he was a guy who couldn't get separation, could make the contested catches and block.
Right. And this is where I ask questions like, are there injuries that we don't know about that slow guys down? Right. And so like Johnny was hurt the whole year, supposedly. Right. So it's like, it's there's a lot of stuff we don't see that you're like, okay, when they're healthy, and that's why it's so hard to judge a player because you just don't know what is going on. But here's a guy, Casey Washington, went to the transfer portal, then came back and really had to, work his way back up. So interesting. It was interesting to me, and I know that Isaiah didn't run a great time, and we knew he wouldn't run a great 40 time because he's more quick than fast. But I'm glad he got hooked up with the Lions. He's a guy that was a little surprising that somebody didn't take him as a slot receiver, punt returner. To me,
agreed.
Late. I mean, I understand he doesn't have a ton of size, but I think he fits a role within an NFL team, and I would be surprised if he didn't make a roster. To be honest, so that's kind of my take on it all. I was surprised. I don't know if Julian Pearl's signed yet.
I haven't seen anything.
So I'm surprised that he hasn't at least signed somewhere because I thought he has enough stuff on film in the Big Ten to get signed somewhere. But it's, I'm happy for all those guys, and I looked at the I think it was like Michigan had this many, then Penn State, then Illinois, then Ohio State, right? I'm like, we look at the NFL talent we've had talent the last 2 years. We've had talent enough to go to bowl games. We did that in 2020. We had enough talent last year. I think that's the disappointing thing when you look on the back end. And the problem in Illinois is we kind of have this notion that we're not as good or we don't have enough athletes. Like in 2007, we didn't know we were as good, but that team ended up having a ton of draft picks and a ton of NFL guys on it. You just didn't know it, right? I think 28 guys made it into an NFL camp, as a free agent or a draft pick. That's a ton.
Well, and Jay, I think one of the most disappointing eras was 09 to 11. The amount of talent on those rosters was worth more than 17 and 21 overall, and a bad Big Ten record like that. That's why Ron Zook ultimately got fired, is because like there was so much talent there, and you just didn't feel like you got the most out of it. But you got a lot of NFL draft picks. You did get to 2 bowl games.
Well, I would say this, and this is one of the most shocking stats, is that Illinois, led the Big Ten in first-round draft picks from 08 to 2012.
Yeah.
Think about that, guys. Think about, and we're talking about Ohio State, who from 2012 to 2024 has had more defensive backs drafted than we've had players drafted.
Right.
I mean, that's how insane one. And I think that Ron Zook, and this is a bigger picture thing, and I can get into the history of the Big Ten. I think that Ron Zook started a new era in the Big Ten of recruiting at a national level.
It's interesting.
We saw Purdue do it, go get some players out of Texas that were not that highly touted, but we saw Ron Zook do it at a national level for big-time recruits. And I think what ended up happening, once Tressel left under things and once everything went down at Penn State and once Michigan had the turmoil and stuff, Urban Meyer comes in and totally changes the game to become national recruiting. Michigan responds by getting Jim Harbaugh, becomes a national recruiting. But you got to give Ron Zook credit, able to pull Corey Legit out of Florida, able to pull so many players out of D.C. with Mike Loxley, able to make certain things happen that maybe were ahead of his time for that era. And I know there's been different windows where Mike White has done it in the 80s. I know there's been different eras of the JUCO route and the niche, but it was finding a niche like that. And I wish they could have won more games for a multitude of reasons. Going and getting Nathan Shieldhouse out of Kansas City, who was a big-time recruit, right? They were getting guys out of different places that maybe they shouldn't have got or wouldn't get today. And I think that's impressive for Coach Zook.
Yeah, there's a ton of talent. There's a ton of talent. Well, Jay, I appreciate the time, the insight, as always. Appreciate the stories as well. We'll have to catch up maybe at some point down the line to get ready for training camp. But enjoy your summer, man.
I look forward to it.